So I was in a little town. I grew up in a little town called Niceville, Florida.
Yeah, I think I've heard of it.
Yep. And I was working in a little bitty development called Blue Water Bay, laying water and sewer lines, and pursuing a degree in criminology. I was wanting to be a cop. My dad was the chief of police of Niceville. And so my goal was to be a cop and, stay in my hometown and support my hometown. And so I was doing that at night, going to school at night and working out in Blue Water Bay during the day, construction. And you know how it gets hot and humid in Florida.
Hmm.
And one day the gnats were all over me. I was sweating. I'm down in this in a ditch, and I'm going, man, I need an inside job. So I jumped out of the ditch, and I went up to the foreman that was running the backhoe, and I said, "Hey, listen, his name was Mike." I said, "I'll never forget this." I said, "Hey, Mike, I need to take the afternoon off." He says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going to go join the Air Force." And he said, "What?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "This isn't for me. I need to go find an inside job, 9 to 5 type thing." And he didn't believe me. He just thought I wanted the afternoon off. No kidding. No kidding. Went to the recruiter, and the rest is history. So
The rest is history. And you have a lot of history and a legacy with Big Mike. I mean, my God. And you know what? I have a similar, childhood. My dad was in the Air Force. He did 26 years. And then my grandfather on my dad's side and my grandfather on my mom's side both served. They were both stationed in Turkey, and that's how my parents met when they were in high school.
Wow.
So and then my great grandfather on my mom's side was a fighter pilot, much different aircraft then. And when he retired, he ended up being like PA, where he could, help Hollywood film flight scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, man, of course that's my great grandfather. Like,
That's awesome though.
Absolutely.
yeah. And I have his book. He only has one copy of the book left, and I have it. And there's pictures with like Frank Sinatra and all sorts of celebrities. There's stories in there about generals back then that only exist in that book. So I gotta, find a way to get that, like, I don't know, published or something.
Absolutely. As I said, the military, again, same background. My dad was a 26-year master sergeant. My wife's father was a 21-year major, and her father was a 29-year colonel. So, and then myself, and now Mike. And so it's as my now boss would say, it's a long blue line.
Definitely. Absolutely. Okay. So before we get into, your careers, I did come up with some questions. I call it the Hero's Gauntlet. And sometimes they're just random. And then sometimes, I actually think them through. And so these ones are a little bit more tailored to you. And so I'm going to ask you 3 questions each. And then after we get through that, then we will talk about a little bit about the highlights of your career. Because I know you have a very interesting background, and you still do to this day. All right. So for the Hero's Gauntlet, first question is for you, Buck. And that question is, what was the proudest moment you had while serving alongside General Goldfein?
Wow, that is a great question. Oh gosh, there's so many, right? So just listening to him and going out traveling with him, going to all calls and watching he changed these young airmen's lives, right? So these young airmen have never physically seen a 4-star meeting, and Vice's meeting them. And he would go up and he would take the time to sit down and say, okay, tell me your story, right? So what's my greatest point is watching that young airman's eyes just glitter, right? because, you just, it's like you meeting your superstar, your hero, right? It's the same thing for that young airman. And I watch him, and it was a young man. I'll never forget this. And it was at Minot, and he didn't know what to say. And boss said, "Hey, take a deep breath. Tell me your story." And you could just tell the young man was really, really nervous. But at the end of the conversation, he gave him a hug. And
Oh, wow.
that was the dad. That was the dad coming out in him, right? Not only a chief, but it was a dad. And that when that young man walked off, so relaxed, that was probably one of the highlights of me watching him as a chief, not only a chief, but as a dad, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And he definitely has that charisma, that aura about him where, he's not only like a unique person with a unique skill set, super hardworking, super intelligent, but he's also got this whole other side to him where, he's very philosophical and really genuinely wants to get to know the people around him. So I think just the culmination of his personality is like insanely unique and very much well appreciated.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Josh, I think that I have to say is, not only was he a four-star general, but he's also a human being, so people, he has feelings, he has, things that he deals with, and we don't see that part of it, right? We just see the chief and the high sides of it. And I'm not saying low sides, but, he has concerns just like we have concerns, right? And, and he kind of, all I can say is when he talks to these young men and women, airmen, soldiers, sailors, and Marines, he just invites them in, right? And it's so neat to watch that, and he does it so well. I can remember one of the conversations that a young lady that he was chatting with, and the young lady says, "You're not going to believe, my dad would never believe this," and he says, "Get him on the phone."
Right.
He talks to this young lady's dad. So you can
That's
imagine
amazing.
this young lady will never, ever forget that.
She
Right?
probably still tells that. She's going to tell her grandkids that story.
Yeah, absolutely. So there you go. So, yeah.
No, I love that. That's beautiful. All right, Big Mike, this one's for you.
Yes, sir.
All right. So what quality from your father do you use for your own approach while serving in the Air Force?
Ooh, that goes deep. It would have to be just the dedication to try and do my best no matter what I'm doing, because we get different challenges every day. So I have to think on my toes and be quick with how I pursue whatever I'm going to do, because every day we get hit with a different type of incident. So as long as you're confident going into it and you know what you're going to end up doing, it's just being consistent with it.
So putting your all into whatever's in front of you and staying disciplined about it, basically.
Yes, sir.
So you think you got that from Buck?
I do.
Nice. You have an example?
It's just there's so many different incidents that we will respond to, and it's just everything's different every day. It's never the same.
Was there ever something you responded to where like your inner Buck came out and you just got after it?
Just different incidents. It's just being driven about, like, I don't even know how to explain it. It's just, I don't know.
Well, think about it. We'll come back to you.
Okay.
I told you the Hero's Gauntlet is no joke. I told y'all.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. I'm ready. Bring it on.
Oh yeah, Buck's he's in the zone. I could tell when a man's in the zone, and he is in the zone. All right. So Buck, do you have any regrets from your time in the U.S. Air Force? And would you have done anything differently?
Zero regrets. Zero regrets. The Air Force not only took care of me, but it took care of my family, and it continues to take care of my family. Right. So, my wife, Jamie, and I were, cleaning out some stuff, and I found one of my first LESs. In my first 2 weeks, I made $231. That was
Don't
an
spend it all in
E1.
one place.
Yeah, that was when that was a long time ago, right? So it was I was an E1 under 2, first LES out of basic training. And it was tough some days to rub two nickels together, right? But at the end of the day, the Air Force was always there. They had programs. They had free movie nights. They had they knew that the young airmen and families, spouses, were monetarily challenged, right? And they looked out for that. And it's just your first sergeants and your senior NCOs back in the day. I can remember, and I'll be honest, I came in October in April of 1982, and a staff sergeant, you were pretty scared of, right? But I can remember some days that they'd pull you to the side and they'd just say, "Hey, it's going to be okay. Just trust the system, trust the institution," is what they would say. And some days you'd go, "Man, I'm not sure that this is what I wanted to do," right? Because you're thinking, you're not going to get rich, and whoever watches this knows that you're not going to get rich. But I think the satisfaction, at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the month, you look and you go, "Man, I helped somebody out, or they helped me out," right? So no regrets at all.
Okay. That was an amazing answer. Loved it. And I believe you.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to let you get off that easy.
Yeah.
So the other part to that question is, what would you have done differently?
So differently, I had the opportunity. I was a staff sergeant going into tech sergeant, and I worked for an admiral over at Sackland in NATO in Norfolk, Virginia. And the admiral that I worked for was pulled up to go be the CNO and the chief of naval operations. And the new admiral that came in had his own staff. So I was I was on a controlled assignment over in Norfolk and with NATO, working for the Navy. And so anyhow, I worked for this one-star admiral, Don Dyer. Rest in peace. Great guy, prior enlisted sailor, went through the ranks, got commissioned. Anyhow, long story short was he had asked. I was 10 years in the Air Force, and he wanted me to get into a program in the Navy called LDO, Limited Duty Officer, and he wanted me to get commissioned. And I looked at it. My wife and I talked about it, and the biggest plus was, I was going to come in. I was going to be limited duty. I was going to be an officer in the Navy. The negative part of it, in our eyes, was I was going to be deployed on a ship for 3 years, right? And so we had 3 children, and we talked about it, and we thanked the admiral for thinking about us, but I declined it. And so we did look back at that a little bit and go, "Hey, where would we have been if we would have taken that avenue?" But at the end of the day, Josh, life is bueno. Life is good.
Yeah, no, I'd say what you chose made sense. I mean, sometimes, raising your family is kind of priceless. You don't get a second chance to see them grow up. So, had you taken that giant pay raise, it would have came with a lot of sacrifice of your time, and you would have missed a whole lot of stuff for that. So, no, I think you chose wisely. That's good.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, Mike, what 3 lessons have you learned from your short time serving so far? And by the way, how long have you been serving?
Coming up on 4 years in December, so I'm still a youngin'.
Okay, so that's a good question then. So what 3 lessons have you learned so far in your career?
I would say the first one is probably the most important. It's to keep your nose clean. No matter what you're doing, just keeping your nose clean, setting yourself up on a path that you want to accomplish your goals. Right now, I work in a job, so I see people mess up, but I can also see how they can rebound within their time. Secondly, it's just being, let's say, disciplined. It kind of goes back to the first one, but being disciplined and not staying within your realm, knowing what you need to do to get done. And then thirdly, can you repeat the question one more time?
What 3 lessons have you learned from your short time serving so far?
Being comfortable in different situations.
Yeah.
So growing up in a military family, it kind of set me up for when I joined the military. So it put me in a more comfortable zone going into basic. Going into basic, I was more confident. I had people asking me questions because I even did ROTC through high school. So I came in more confident within that. And then once I got to my first base, I came with a big group. So that group kind of looked towards me and I kind of helped try and lead them as soon as we got here. So just being competent and leading definitely helped.
Absolutely. The more you get uncomfortable and take that chance on yourself, the more you get out of your comfort zone, the quicker things are going to click for you.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if I'm being transparent, I didn't do that until I was 10 years in. I mean, if I'm being completely honest with you, I had a lot of catching up to do when it clicked for me. And so now, where I'm sitting, I try to get that light bulb to go off a little bit earlier than it did for me. And so I think that, you being ahead of the game, you're kind of always prepared for that next chapter, and being comfortable in your own skin is a serious blessing because not everyone has that. Right. So you have to earn it. Right. It's not just handed to you.
Yes, sir.
Drinking, I'd say is pretend confidence. Right. But you truly earned it, Mike. So I'm proud of you, man. Keep doing that. Keep challenging yourself.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, Buck. How do you feel when you see your son in uniform?
Oh, wow. I tell you, Josh, you just gave me goosebumps. Just gave me
Boom.
goosebumps. It's like that rooster walking around, right? You bow your chest out, you go, yeah, that's my boy. I was that dad that never said, Mike, you need to join the Air Force. That was going to be his choice, right? I was not going to be that helicopter dad to go, this is what you need to do to succeed, right? I said, Mike, you do whatever makes you happy. And, he did a couple jobs and he was, I'll never forget this. So I'm a civilian working up in Washington, and Mike's second shift here in Hampton Roads at a Newport shipbuilding. And so I would drive home every Friday night, right? I'd come home Friday night and then go back up to Washington on Sundays. And when he called me on my drive home, and he said, hey, Dad, you going to be up? I need to talk to you. And so as a dad, so many things run through your mind, so many things. And he's like, hey, you going to be up? And I said, absolutely, because he didn't get off till midnight. And so he comes in and he has 2 adult beverages in his hand as he's walking in. And I'm going, oh God, he's going to tell me I'm going to be a granddad. I'm thinking the worst, right? And he sits down and he goes, I said, what's up, dude? He said, hey, I just want your blessing. I want to go in the Air Force. And I thought, dude, no brainer. But to answer your question,
you're like, open those drinks, let's go.
Absolutely. But to answer your question, when I saw him, my wife and I went to BMTS graduation, and I saw him, at the tap out, when you go after, when you graduate basic training, it was just, it was like I was looking in a mirror 40 years earlier. So, yeah,
Wow,
absolutely.
that must be
Over the moon.
surreal.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I would assume, Josh, that, my dad thought the same thing, right? Thought the same thing
Definitely.
about me. So, but yeah, over the moon.
Wow, that's beautiful. Yeah, do y'all have any pictures of that day?
I do.
You got to shoot those over to me.
Yeah, I'll share those with you.
I'll
Yep,
make that the episode cover.
Yeah, I will do that. Yep.
Awesome. All right, last question from Mike. Okay, so you've been in 4 years, so this is a good question. So, Mike, where do you hope to see yourself in 10 years?
I would hopefully like to be an OSI. That's what I joined the Air Force to do, or my goal was to go OSI. So once I get back from deployment, I'm going to pursue that. Ideally, I'd like to make staff this year. I missed staff by 2 points last year, so that was a bit defeating. But again,
But can I interrupt him? He's only been in 2.5 years when he was tested.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not upset about it. It was another year to learn and grow, so I'm perfectly okay with it. It just would have been cool to make it on my first try. But my goal this year is to make staff, and then within the next 10 years, hopefully be a tech and maybe even a master.
So you want to do 20 years or more?
Yes, sir.
And hopefully be OSI at that point.
OSI, that's the goal, because you never know. It's just interesting. Again, it's like security forces. You don't know what you're getting into every day. It's always a different challenge, and it's always something different you can learn. A lot of good experience comes out of that, being able to travel. I joined the Air Force to travel. Security forces hasn't let me travel a lot. I originally had orders over to Ramstein, Germany, but I was going through tech school right when COVID kicked off, and they canceled all overseas orders. So I got converted here to Tyndall, but I am very happy I came to Tyndall. Tyndall's been great.
Yeah, I mean, at least you got Tyndall. You know what I'm saying? It could have gone a much different way.
Yes, sir.
Could end up a cannon, or not saying anything's wrong with cannon, but
right. You could have just been in the middle of nowhere, basically. If that's your thing, great. But something tells you that might not be your thing. I don't know. Okay. Well, hey, you guys passed the Heroes Gauntlet. You did phenomenal. Thank you so much, for sharing those stories. Those were absolutely beautiful. So thank you. And so for the topics, I just thought we could kind of hear your Air Force journey a little bit. Now, obviously, if you went into every single nook and cranny, I mean, that'd be a lot. I'm not looking at you, Mike. I'm looking at Buck when I say that. So I was thinking maybe just hit the highlights, hit those major crossroads, those major points in your career. Just because I think it's a really cool story for you, especially Buck, as to how you got to work for General Goldfein and how you still work with him to this day. And that your son was in it. Just the whole thing was just kind of a beautiful situation and story. So I was hoping you could kind of talk about yourself a little bit.
Absolutely. And that's the toughest deal is trying to talk about yourself. Right. But so I came in for 4 years and just to get an education and to get out. And my first assignment, Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. And had no idea, as I said, I grew up in Niceville. And I was hoping to get, Eglin, Herbert, Tyndall, McDill, and my first assignment comes out as Holloman. I'm thinking, I have no idea what I'm about to do.
Oh my goodness.
Went out there as an admin guy, for the older folks going to watch this, a 702, and worked in the mailroom. I went out and at Bits delivered the mail and caught the eye of a exec over at the 833rd Air Division, and when we had air divisions, and he was an exec for a guy named Colonel Chuck Horner, to retire at the rank of 4-star General. Chuck Horner ran the war, the Gulf War. anyhow, so I was pulled up to go work at the 833rd Air Division, worked there a little bit, got an assignment to TAC XP, matter of fact, at Langley here. And I was pulled on to the XP staff, and General Horner was the TAC XP, worked for General Horner on his staff. He left. I worked for a guy, General Joe Ashey. General Ashey was there for about 16 months. He left. Mike Ryan came in. And then when General Mike Ryan came in, by that time I had got my assignment to NATO over in Norfolk, a joint assignment that went over to Norfolk for 3 years, started out with Admiral Bud Edney and then into Admiral Dyer. Worked for him for 3 years. Wanted to get out of the flag business, right? I wanted to get out of working for GOs.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
How are you working for so many high-ranking people back to back to back? How is that? That's very unusual.
Yeah. So, when you get into an admin staff, right? And it was like TAC XP admin, right? So you're right outside the directorate's office. When these 2-stars at the time, they rotate, the next 2-star will come in, but sometimes they'll have an admin guy that they want to bring in. It's just kind of, that they're comfortable with or whatever. But these guys kept asking me, or they said, hey, let Buck stay along, right? So I was able to stay and watch different, their different management styles. Buck,
you could seriously, you could write a book, because the amount of people that you've worked with, with the responsibility that they had, the amount of different leadership approaches that you've seen and witnessed in the behind the scenes stuff too. I mean, you could easily, put that into a book. You should think about that.
Yeah. But, so when I did my 3 years at NATO, and I wanted to get out of the business of working for flags and GOs. And so I was hired to go down to Eglin. And so it was kind of funny. I signed into Eglin April 20th, 1992. I joined the Air Force April 20th, 1982.
Wow.
10 years to the day I signed into my hometown thinking, score, I'm gonna homestead there, I'm gonna hide, no one's gonna know me, I'm just gonna hang out. Still had family there. Anyhow, so I went down I was assigned to the Tactical Air Warfare Center, TAC, now is AUK Air Warfare Center. Went down there, went down into the flight line side, was doing OPRs, EPRs, or it was APRs at the time, and decorations, right? So working for a little squadron, and there was George Harrison, General Harrison was the TAC commander, and found out that I had worked, my previous work, right? And they were looking for a guy to come up into the admin there in the front office. And I just said, not interested, but I didn't have a choice. So the exec, Chuck Rumley, I'll never forget him. He said, hey, Buck, General Harrison would like to meet you. Would you like to come over and meet him? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And I said, what do I need to bring? And I'll never forget this. And he said, well, everything you came with.
Oh my God.
And I'm thinking, well, what does this mean? So I knew what it meant, right? So I knew that, I didn't hide long. It was about 3 weeks. So
how are you, what are you doing to make these generals be like, hey, Buck's, that's my right hand, that's my man? Like, how is that happening? What, like, is it your work ethic?
Great question, Josh. Great question. You get into an inner circle, right? You get into a trust, right? That these flags trust you, and they know that they can say something, and you're a confidant, right? So I think that was one of the reasons. Those guys talk to each other. They are at different conferences that they go, hey, listen, you ever heard of this guy named Buck? And one would go, yeah, absolutely, good guy, whatever. So George Harrison calls me in, I go to work for him. I'm in there about 5 months. And I'm sending him back and forth to MacDill because he's just about to deploy to Riyadh to be the JTF SWA commander. And I pick him up from the airport, Fort Walton Beach Airport. And I said, hey, how'd your TDY go? He said, hey, it went great. I said, yeah. I said, you're going to have a lot of fun over there in Riyadh. And he said, yeah, we are. And he said, I said, I said, wait a minute. I said, we. He says, do you want me to tell Jamie or are you going to tell her? And I had 4 days to get my stuff together, and we headed off to Riyadh. Did 6 months there at JTF SWA. I lived at Escon Village. There, outside of Riyadh. And so anyhow, did that, came back, still thinking that, I'm good. Now I'm back home. And General Harrison gets an assignment to Afotech in Albuquerque. And he goes, guess we're on our way to Albuquerque, Buck. And I thought, oh no, man, I can't do it.
Dang, New Mexico got you.
Yeah. So now we're in Albuquerque. And working at Afotech, been there about 16 months. He didn't get picked up for his 3rd star, and he wanted to take care of Jamie and I. And he said, hey, listen, he said, I think this would be a good move for you. And he said, I think you need to go to Washington. And here I was at Tech Sergeant, and I'm thinking, Washington. By this time I'm going, yeah. So Michael wasn't even born yet.
Oh,
this
wow.
was 96. And he says, I think you need to go to work for Ron Fogelman. And I'm going, no, I don't think so. I said, I don't know anything about Washington. So he said, yeah. So long story short was that he flew, that they got my name. I made a cut. They wanted to interview Jamie and I. So Jamie and I flew out for an interview with General Fogelman and Miss Jane and the team. And they hired me.
Oh, wow.
So we went back to Albuquerque, and 2 weeks later, we're packed up, moving to Washington.
Jeez.
Yeah. So we get to Washington. I work for General Fogelman, in the front office staff. And about 18 months later, I won't use the exec's name because of what he said. But he said, hey, good news, Buck. Bad news is you got an assignment to OSA. Good news is I think we can fix it. And I said, this is honest to gosh truth. And I said, by that time I had made master. And I said, no, there's no reason for another master sergeant in the Air Force to get my assignment because who I work for, that I'm not going. And I told him that, and he said, go talk to Jamie about it. And I said, no, it's not fair for another master sergeant to get hit with my remote and me not go because who I'm working for. Not fair. So,
dang, Buck, that's some quite the integrity. I'm impressed.
So that's just the way that I did my 21 years, right? So when I left, Michael was 10 months old. Went to OSAN for a year, finally worked at the squadron level, worked for a guy named Jake Palumbo, lieutenant colonel, that made 2 stars. It was funny. I went in, this is the crazy stories. I went into General Fogelman's aide de camp, and I said, and he went by Mumbles, Major Palumbo, and I said, Mumbles. I said, look at this, man. This guy has your same last name. He said, yeah, that's my brother.
Whoa.
So I'm working for Mumbles, which is the aide to Fogelman, going to work for his brother. That's the MSG commander out at OSAN. Anyhow, did a year at OSAN, came back, and again, so now I have the stink on me. I'm coming back to headquarters ACC, and General Eberhardt's exec at the time, a guy named Colonel Phil Breedlove, calls me and says, Buck, you're late for work. On the ACC front staff, And so go up into ACC headquarters working for COMAC. And then 8 COMACs later, I go to Washington and work for, I work for Eberhart, and then I worked for Jumper, and then I worked for Hornberg, and then I retired in Hornberg's tenure and went right back to work as a trip planner as a civilian at ACC. It was Master Sergeant Holloway on Friday and Buck on Monday. So,
Wow.
And then went through 7 more: Coley, Fraser, Keys, Carlisle, and Carlisle's the last one. And then I went and did a real quick stint over at AMIC because I knew I couldn't get promoted anymore at ACC. And then about 14 months later, I got a call from the chief's office and asked if I was interested to come up there and do the deal. So sorry it took so long, but that was it.
No, you have done a lot. Oh my gosh. I'm like, okay, now that's it. Nope. Now that's it. Nope. There's more.
Yeah.
So when you retired, what year was that?
I retired from active duty in 2002. I was supposed to retire in April, but stop loss because of 9/11. So I was able to retire in June, and then really just transitioned the next, that following Monday as a civilian. Because they didn't want to lose the continuity, right? It's kind of a one-man show.
I mean, you've been the continuity your whole career.
Yeah, absolutely. And then where I am today, it's all because of that trust, that not letting them down.
Yeah, trust and loyalty, is a big deal.
Yeah. And Josh, I can speak for Mike. Mike's the same way, right? He's loyal to that organization and that team, and I think that team knows it, right? So kudos to him.
Definitely. Okay, so how long have you known General Goldfein for?
So General Goldfein, when he was the A3 at ACC 1 and 2 star, that was probably, I can't even guess. Will Frazier was the COMAC. I would probably say I've known him 12 years, but I knew his brother Steve Goldfein, which was the 1st Fighter Wing commander, and then went out to be the Air Warfare Center commander out at Nellis. So I knew his brother before I knew him. But then, General Goldfein and I, he traveled with General Will Frazier to one of the AOR trips, and I was, on that TUI, and we just built a relationship and a friendship then.
So could you talk a little bit about that, like the details surrounding how you and the general, hit it off?
It was kind of the same story that I brought you. The thing I told you earlier in the conversation is, he said, "Hey, what's your story?" He goes, "Wow, that's a pretty cool story." So I just kind of told him the same story I told you. He said, "Hey, that's a pretty cool story," and he knew that the paths that the folks that I have crossed, he knew. You put that in a memory bank, right? And he said, he's never told me this, but I know that I do it, is that you pull that out when you need it, right? And he and Miss Dawn were up in Washington, and they needed a trip planner, they needed a logistics guy, and they said, "Hey, see what Buck's doing."
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And how was that? Was that like you hit the ground running? Was it a different situation because of the position that he held? How was that?
So the ops tempo, doing it for COMAC, of course, is not doing the same for, the chief of staff. But, when you go up there, you just react, right? You just get into a react mode. and you get into a survival mode. And my entire 4 years I was up there, my goal was to keep him off the front of the Air Force Times, right? Anything to do with logistics, anything to do with mil air, anything to do with anything that I had to do with his travel, right? I did not want to be that purpose or that cause. And, you know, I'm going to knock on wood that, you know, my mission accomplished. But it was, again, it was that, you know, you use the tools, whether it was general counsel, whether it was legislative liaison, whether it was international public affairs. I mean, you just use those networks to make sure that you were doing the right thing, right? Or, you know, when someone asked that, hey, we want to put him in an Israeli F-15, you know, I said, oh no, I can't approve that, right? So I go, you know, you just have, it's just like you, right? You have a network and you go, okay, who's gonna help, who's gonna approve this, right? So, you know, it's just all I can say is, you know, when I got up there, it was a little bit of survival because it was the ops tempo was so high, was so fast. And, you know, when I worked at ACC, you had a team of 3 or 4 that traveled, right? 5 at the most. You know, when you work for the chief, you know, you have 10, 12 sometimes that travel with the party, and you're responsible for that entire party.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So anyhow, you know, again, I'm not, it was a good gig.
Wow. So, you know, when I got to be an exec to a med group commander when I was a tech sergeant, and that was like my first look behind the curtain, as I like to say, right? I've only met them on their very professional and best terms. I've never got to know them as a person or behind the scenes. And so I was working for Colonel Crystal Henderson. I hit it off with her. And I think it's because I made her laugh is why, because it was supposed to be an officer and I was just there temporarily, but then she made the call to keep me in that position.
Yeah.
So I was the only group level exec that was enlisted. And I'd like to think it's because, well, 1, I made her laugh. 2, she trusted me and could vent to me. And 3, you know, I was always there to just listen and lend an ear or opinion. And that did happen sometimes. And so, you know, did that ever happen with you, Buck, when you worked for General Goldfein? Did you have situations like that?
Absolutely. You know, I'm there was a situation that that was devastating for the Air Force that may have happened out in Texas with a staff sergeant that he was a security forces, I believe, at a time. He went and he went to a church and did some bad things, right? I'll just leave it at that. And that really hit Dave really bad. I mean, it just tore him up. And I remember if you went into his office, he had a picture of John Chapman, you know, on his wall in his office. And, you know, I walked through the outer office there when he, you know, in the chief's office, and the exec was standing there, and you could just tell, I mean, it was a million-mile stare out the E-ring window to the National Monument. And I walked right past the exec, right past the senior aide de camp, right into his office. And don't really do that, right? And I said, hey, looks like you could use a friend. Don't know why I did it. You know that, but I did. I said, hey, looks like you can use a friend. He said, yeah, Buck sure can. So this goes back to what you were saying. You know, they're human, right? They have feelings, right? And you know, some people don't realize that. You know, it's just like a movie star or a football player or you know, whatever. They have the other side too. They want to vent, right? But it's always, can I vent, or will this ever, you know, there's things that that have said behind closed doors don't want to stay behind closed doors. So, yeah, I mean, that's probably one of the toughest things that I've ever had to do with him, right? Because I saw that, I felt that hurt, right? You know, and then I would give a couple of ideas or scenarios or suggestions. I guess I could call them suggestions on, hey boss, I think, you know, I'm working through GC and they're not comfortable with you doing X, Y, and Z. And he said, yeah, okay, thanks. But I'm still going to do this. Because he, you know, he owed people to see that side of him. So, you know, that I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to, you know, air any laundry for him because he's such a great man. But you know.
So you basically seen him in some really tough spots and have to, you know, even for a man in his position, have to be really brave in certain times and really make a tough call, you know, that's going to be emotionally challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, everybody has to do that, right? Everybody has to do it. And, you know, it just comes, it comes, you know, at a position that sometimes that you have people agree and sometimes you don't. But, you know, at the end of the day, I'd be his wingman any day, anytime.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So to flip that around a little bit, do you have any funny stories that maybe myself and everyone else doesn't know about?
You know, funny stories. You know, I don't know if I have any funny stories. I just have stories that, you know, you know, he and I would, you know, I think that I'm gonna, Josh, I think I'm gonna back off because like, if he listens to this, he's gonna go, I don't think that was so funny, Buck. No, I think that you know, we you know, we've done some great things. The last 3 years working for him, you know, in the public sector has been absolutely a dream, right? And so you know, I would. Like I said, you know, I'm going to go back to referring to I'd be his wingman anytime. Just a great guy. You know, I don't have any of those stories that I think that.
No, hey, Buck, I ain't trying to get you in trouble, my man. So don't let's.
Yeah.
I said funny stories. You know, that's yeah, that's you gotta be careful.
Yeah, yeah.
So okay, I have a good question then. So, you know, if you ever ask someone, you know, what their biggest strengths are, it might be different what that person says about themselves than like their peer or coworker would say about them, right? So my question to you is, what are his top 3 attributes that made him such an effective leader?
Oh man, I think he's a great listener. I think he's a great leader. You know, and I think that you know, people respect him, right? They respect because he is such a good listener, right? And you know, he really methodically thinks things through, right? Because he knows that some of the decisions that he's going to make are consider making, you know, could be long term, right? So I think it's just it's leadership. The more that I watched him when he was active duty, it was like he's not a speaker, he's a storyteller. You can't wait for him to turn the page, right? You can't wait. You listen to him and you go, oh man, what's going to happen next? And it's that he turns that page and you just can't wait for him to turn that page to get to the next. And then towards the end, you don't want the story to end, right? You want it to, and that's just the way he kind of locks you in. You know, I can remember, you know, I can go back to, I'm going to refer to Mike, and so Mike wanted to come up to the Pentagon before he came in the Air Force, right? So he came up, you know, he had a big red beard. I said, dude, you got to shave that, dude. You can't come up here and do this. You know, I was going to introduce him to some folks that I work with around the Pentagon. And so I brought him up, and I think that Mike really never asked what my jobs were. You know, he never really understood who I had worked for, right? And it was something I never talked about. You know, it was just, I did a job. And so, you know, I brought Mike up. This is before he went active duty, introduced him. And Mike, you can interject anytime. Brought him up, met him. He met Chief Wright. You know, Chief Wright sat him down, you know, behind closed doors. They sat, and Chief Wright asked about the same questions, right? Well, Mike, what are you looking for out of the Air Force? What can we do, right?
So you're telling me, Mike, you got to talk to Chief Wright about joining before you joined?
His first question he ever asked me was, what can the Air Force do better?
Oh my
Before I was
gosh.
even in the Air Force. So just opened so many doors and just already thinking.
That's unreal that you're in the Pentagon, in his office, and that's who you're talking to about the air. Wow. That's mind-boggling.
And you know what the bad thing was, Josh? He got coined from Chief Wright before I did.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Dang. Well, Mike, you know that he is Big Mike. I mean, he does, you know, I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah. But anyhow, and so then, you know, I introduced him to a couple other folks there in the building, and then he was able to go in and chat with General Goldfein for a few minutes. And I think then he kind of realized, right? But it still wasn't, you know, I don't think it really hit Mike, right? So, you know, Mike talks to the chief, and then, you know, we go about our ways. Matter of fact, I think we went to a Washington Capitals game that night, and came back home to sent Mike off, you know, in December. This was November. We sent him off in December. And the chief comes to me and goes, hey, Buck, he says, you know, he's going to do this holiday tour. And he said, I wanted to go to BMTS. And he said, I want to go there right after Christmas, and I want to visit the airmen in BMTS. And I knew where he was going with this, right? Because he knew who was in BMTS in December. This guy right below me here, right? And so now we're working for the chief to visit basic, you know, BMTS there at Lackland. And Mike's not the reason that he went. He wanted to go. We went to like 4 bases, right, and in that area, and it was just a holiday tour. Well, anyhow, long story short was that squadron that Mike was in was tapped to be visited by the chief, and the MTI could not figure out what the heck did we do wrong? How did I get tapped to do this?
Oh my goodness gracious.
And so,
well, only Mike knew. He knew.
So inside baseball. So then we send, you know, we had to send advanced OSI, advanced security, to do all the advanced, right? So one of the advanced guys went out, and lo and behold, worked with Mike's TI, which were both security defenders. And so the TI says, what is the deal? How come we got picked? And so the OSI guy said, hey, listen, I can't tell you. He said, but one of your troops might know somebody that knows the chief. And so then, needless to say, Mike was called in and said, okay, dude, let it loose. Mike said, I have no idea what you're talking about. And he goes, okay, now I know the deal. And Mike said under his breath, says, my dad worked for him. So anyhow, it was really neat to watch. And I had some folks take some pictures, right, of the chief sitting in and talking to Mike. There were 25 people in there. 30 people, and again, wanted to know their stories, right? Where you from? How you doing? Why are you here?
Wow. Can you imagine being in basic training and having him show up? And Chief Wright was there too?
No, Chief Wright wasn't on that one. It was Joe Goldfein, and I don't know who else was traveling with him at the time, but it was neat that not only focused on Mike's squadron, but he focused on, there was a picture of the mass, 1,300 recruits, right? This is before graduation, so they're all recruits. And he's talking to these young airmen, these young recruits, and talking about the long blue line, right? And what you have to look forward to, and let us take care of you, right? That was always him. The long blue line, let us take care of you. And so anyhow,
That's awesome. Did you see your son?
so I didn't go. I think my wife would have killed me if I'd have gone without her. So
that's a good point.
no, I did not go. I was asked to go, and I just declined. I didn't want, that's not the right thing to do, right?
Mhm.
So I'd love to seen him, but it wasn't fair. Again, so I go back to, it wasn't fair for Michael to see his dad and these
Right.
other recruits not to see their parents, right?
Absolutely.
So I kind of respected that, and but I think I was the first in line, there at BMTS graduation. I
For
made
sure.
sure I was the first on the airplane to get to San Antonio. That's for sure. Proud of him.
Absolutely. All right. Well, heck, that's quite the adventure,
I know. I'm
Buck.
sorry, guys, I took so long. Mike,
No. I mean, just the amount of people that you spent time with is so unique. I mean, you have so many stories about when you saw someone lost their cool, or saw someone who got challenged, or saw someone fail. People that no one knows anything about because they're so high up there that their inner circle is very small, right? And so the stories that I mean, we could talk for hours. I bet, just the things that you've seen that you could bring up. You're just such a unique person. Thank you for your service, Buck.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I pass the torch to Mike, and Mike and I are out of the same mold, and so I only look forward to the days to watch him grow and do the same thing.
Absolutely.
I hate to say this, I think Mike's more organized than I am. So, I think that he's going to be a great airman, a great leader. I hope I can say he's going to be a great chief.
100%.
Yeah.
Hey, y'all, before we get to you, Mike, could I do a quick bathroom break?
For sure.
'Cause I crushed this whole thing of water here. I'll be right back.
Okay. How you doing, man?
Good.
Yeah. Can you hear the kids in the background?
No.
No. I hear crew chasing somebody around back there.
Oh.
Yeah.
How do you have the blurry background?
You just go into the settings.
Oh.
Yeah, you can click on, if you right click on your picture. I think it should be in there.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and then you just
You
hit blur.
you have to download it. It's all right.
Oh, okay. Hey guys, you want to say hi to Mikey real quick? No, I thought I heard him back there.
You're blurry background anyway, so it don't matter.
It's what?
I said you have a blurry background anyways.
Yeah. No, I had at one point in time, I had the backyard view of the sunrise.
Is he code?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
You want, mama? What do you want?
So this was, let me see that date I was telling you about, 20 December 2019 on that coin I was telling you about.
What'd you say?
That, remember the coin I was telling you about, the date on it was December 20th, 2019. Much better.
Good to go.
They're good to go. Good for you.
All right. Big Mike, I saved you for last because I feel like, you have a little bit shorter of a story, and that's okay because you're still writing yours. So why don't you run us through your career, my man?
So it all starts when I asked my dad for his blessing to join the Air Force. So it all started with that. I was working at the shipyard, was just tired of what I was doing. I was working night shift, just got tired of sitting around working nights. I wanted a change. I wanted a challenge. I wanted something new. So I was like, hey, do I have your blessing to go in the Air Force? And he said, of course.
And how old were you when you joined?
22.
So you joined a little bit older than, a lot of folks join at 18.
Right at 18. But I personally, I think that was the best decision I could have made because I was already a little bit more smarter, a little more mature, and just I had a little more life experience than some of the people that had just turned 18 joining. I feel like it just kind of sets you up to help them be a better leader.
Absolutely. I always was jealous of people who joined a little bit later because it's almost like I got stuck as a child. There's a little bit more of a lag for maturity when you don't even know how the real world operates. You know what I mean? So
sure,
you grow up a lot quicker when, you're on your own, and have a civilian side job and you kind of know how the world works a little bit. So I got another question. What made you have that talk with your dad before you joined? Because you said you asked for his blessing. Now, obviously, you didn't have to do that. So what compelled you to do that?
So it kind of goes back to the job I was working before the shipyard. I had worked there for 2.5 years. I had moved around, but they would not hire me as a supervisory role because of my age. So I ended up going to the shipyard because it was paying more and there was a better opportunity for me at that specific time. And then the same thing with the shipyard. I moved up to the next position and I couldn't get any further because of my age. And I wasn't challenged within that year. That when I got my promotion, I wasn't challenged at all. I felt like I was still doing the same job. Just I was motivated, but I wasn't challenged and I wanted a new challenge. And so I just pulled him aside and I was asked for the blessing to go in the Air Force. And I knew that would be my biggest challenge so far in my life.
Do you think that talk with your dad beforehand was just that you knew, he would appreciate that decision?
For sure. I mean, I of course knew he would be proud of me for making that decision, but it was a fact of just asking because I know my grandpa, my dad, and then it would be me. So it's kind of just following in their footsteps as well. Just making
that's pretty awesome. How did that night go after that?
It was pretty quick talk. I didn't beat around the bush, just got right to it and then just started talking.
That's awesome. What was the drink of choice?
I think it was an IPA for me, and it was a Shiner Bock, or I don't know.
Yeah. How about a Devil's Backbone?
That's what it was. Okay.
Hey, Buck, you got a good memory. You remember people's names and position. I'm like, I can't even do that now. So you've got a good memory. I think that's one of the reasons you kept getting hired.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Mike, continue. Yeah, you just got started and I already hit you with a lot of questions, but keep going.
Nope, you're perfectly fine. So after that, we pretty much, I went to TAPS. TAPS was quick. I picked security forces. I did pick security forces. My second choice would have been PA, but I wanted to go security forces to better set myself up to be some type of law enforcement, try and go OSI, try and do security detail, stuff like that, personal security. Just because that's what I grew up wanting to do seeing my dad working for all the generals and meeting all their drivers and whatnot. That was always my inspiration once joining the Air Force but they actually got away with a lot of the driver slots. So, but back to, I went to basic. Basic was 8.5 weeks. Did that, had a bunch of fun, got to meet General Golfing for the second time. Got singled out a little bit in a good way. The day before he came, they were just like, I need to put eyes on you. Didn't tell me why, so I didn't know until the day of, when we got pulled into a classroom and he kind of talked to us. But that was a really cool experience. I know a lot of people don't get to experience that, and I'm very grateful for that. And after that, just finished basic, did 13 weeks in tech school, and then about week 9 or 10 is when COVID hit. So we were the last team to get pepper spray, the last team to fight the big red man. And then COVID hit.
What's the big red man?
So you get in a ring, and you have to do like baton strikes to teach you your baton skills against like big cadre in a big red suit.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
You start beating him up, and there's another one that'll come out of the woodworks and beat you up.
Oh my goodness.
It's a good time.
It sounds like it.
But after that, pretty much finished. Had orders to Ramstein. COVID canceled all overseas listings for, I don't know, like 10 or 12 weeks. So I happened to fall in that time frame of them canceling all overseas orders. So my orders got diverted to Tyndall. Came to Tyndall when COVID was in its prime. I remember doing 14-day quarantine right when I got to Tyndall. So I sat in a dorm room, had some pretty decent food.
What is that? Is that sarcasm?
That's sarcasm.
They were going to the dining facility and bringing you food, right?
They were. It was
I never had I'm public health, so I'm not allowed to do the quarantines. Like it was like, we were too essential to that COVID mission, right? So I can't even, I've never had 14 days of my life. Like that's like a jail sentence or something. Like I've never even experienced that.
It was difficult going somewhere. You didn't know what you were doing. You were just stuck in a hotel room for 14 days. They told you you could go on a run or a walk alone, not with anybody. But you had to be back in your room by dark, and you could only leave to go on a run once a day. So luckily I don't think I left the room till like day 3 or 4. And I actually ran down to the beach, and that was the first time I saw the crystal clear blue water and the white sandy beaches.
Yeah.
And then I made that a daily trip.
Which day did you start that?
Probably like day 3 or 4.
That's when you're like, I gotta get out of here. I don't care if I'm running or whatever.
But I ended up doing my 14 days. Everybody was COVID negative. So I came with about 10 other people, which was very unusual. But it fell under a lot of the people had overseas orders. And Tyndall was just starting to get people in because it was after the hurricane. I think it was like a year and a half after. And it was just starting to get its feet back going. Ended up going to flight, worked flight for about a year, started working in the armory, handing out weapons, doing all that fun stuff. And then worked flight a little more, and then got picked up to go back office. And I'm still currently back office doing reports and analysis. So I currently do all police reports and incident reports and tickets and AFJs and all that fun stuff on Tyndall. It's very interesting. I work directly with a lot of the shirts, the commanders, and legal. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now. I'll be doing that up until I leave for deployment and see what happens when I come back.
Are you excited about that?
I am. I'm very excited. It'll be my first
awesome.
Deployment. So
that's awesome, man. So security forces. So here's a little bit of a deep question for you.
Okay.
So, security forces does have some struggles, right? You often see it online.
Very much so.
It seems like mental health struggles are, an issue, and it seems like security forces sometimes, is the ones that are more vocal about it. And And so, my question to you, Mike, is like, have you seen that? Have you experienced that? And, how have you, supported your fellow airmen or gotten around that as best you can? Like, what does that look like for you?
It's different because we're all mandatory reporters. So it's kind of like people want to talk, but a lot of people can't talk. So it's kind of difficult for people to come to you because they know, and it's not to say that they'll get their gun taken, but they know what will happen if people do talk. So I feel like there needs to be an easier way for people to talk within security forces without them thinking they're going to have repercussions that can affect their career long lasting. Like even if
question for you. I know if someone says they want to end their life, that would obviously get your weapon taken away. Is that the only time the weapon's taken away, or could something less severe get it taken away? Like, do they have the freedom to say
jokingly? It kind of just depends on the circumstance. I'm not the person that decides to take their weapon. Of course, it's always the commander in the shirt, but it just, people can joke and people can take it the wrong way, and that's all it takes. So it's like, it's a fine line of people when they are joking about it or they're serious about it. It's kind of difficult.
Have you ever, I asked the same question then, what things have you done to work around that to still be there for someone or yourself?
You just get as close as you can with the people on your flight. So you want to learn their personalities and be able to tell when somebody's down or when somebody's doing something different or not themselves. So you want to make friends with everybody on your flight to be able to really see their personality. And when something's off, you want to be able to recognize that something's off.
Absolutely. Are you one that stays typically positive, or are you more a glass half empty type of person?
I try and stay positive. I try and talk to everybody and get to know everybody, so that if there is ever an incident where I need to go talk to somebody, I can always feel comfortable and I can always sit them aside before it gets to that point of them making any decisions or trying to talk to somebody. I'd like for them to talk to me, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And you talked about when you joined, you were looking for a challenge. When have you been the most challenged since you joined?
Probably flight. Flight was a big challenge. We had a lot of different instances. It's just like, again, it's security forces, you respond to something different every day. Like today I had a challenge of a incident on base that I've never had to deal with, or I'll have people coming to ask me questions and I've never had to deal with it. So I'll have to find the answers to be able to accomplish whatever the incident is, to be able to help them complete their task.
Is there a time where you were the most challenged?
Yeah, we had a incident off base where it started on base and it ended up being basically a high-speed chase, and that was probably my biggest challenge, just because it was something I've never experienced. Probably the biggest adrenaline rush I've ever had, and it's just being able to balance multiple different things at the same time, being out of your comfort zone, but then being able to reel it back in to calm yourself and take control of yourself and remain calm in that situation.
So yeah, I'm sure it got really intense when that other person, they flipped the switch and they're trying to get the heck out of there, and the situation gets real quick.
Very real.
Were you able to keep your cool in that situation?
I was.
How did it end?
It ended she ended up pulling into a private neighborhood, and we ended up she pulled in and parked and acted like she was sleeping. Because she got trapped in the driveway. So yeah.
So it ended peacefully, thankfully.
It did.
Okay, well that's good. Well, dang, Mike, I'm proud of you, man. I'm sure that's not the last challenge we're gonna have either. But I do have the ultimate faith in you, that you can handle the situations that you're faced with. Okay. Well, hey, I knew your story would be a little bit shorter, so I had a little bit extra questions for you.
Bring
And
'em
I
on.
guess when it comes to, I guess I have one last question regarding your story, and I'm going to take it back to the question that Chief Wright asked you. What did he ask you in that office?
What can the Air Force do better?
So you've got now you've got 4 years under your belt, right? Let's hear it now, Mike. What would your, if Chief Wright asked you that today, what would you tell him?
Um, I wish there was an easier way to help individuals out that have not say been done wrong by the Air Force, but there's been different incidents within the 4 years I've been in where, let's just say, I knew a master sergeant who had orders to overseas, and his orders got canceled while his orders got canceled within 10 days of him supposed to be overseas. So all of his goods, household goods, are already on a freight going over there, and they diverted his orders to Holloman Air Force Base.
That is brutal.
So it's just little things like that, which, in my personal opinion, I don't think that should happen, because now he's going to go. So it's 3 months to get his goods. So now it's going to be, say, another 6 at least to get it back. Just different instances like that. I feel like the Air Force should do better.
We're almost like common sense should come in and help this person out that clearly, it doesn't really make sense for that situation to happen.
Nope.
Right. So like I call that, I've seen that myself. And when you're a leader, when you're leading people, you can kind of be that voice to stop those things from happening. Now with him, that one's kind of above our pay grade, right? But you will see those situations. Trust me. I have this term, people are greater than PowerPoints. I might even put that on one of my shirts. And it all stems from an airman who had brain surgery, like literal brain surgery, right? And he was not doing good. He had a very lengthy recovery time, and his wife was basically driving him around. Well, I was filling in for the shirt, and they showed up because their leadership told him he had to like finish some PowerPoint or time card or something. And they were just so focused on that task that they couldn't see that was an inappropriate thing to ask someone who just had brain surgery. You know what I mean? And sometimes we just get so caught up in like the little details, we fail to see the big picture. And I think that's what you're describing. And, Mike, I challenge you to be the one that sees the big picture, as you progress through your career.
I second that.
You're going to see a lot of short-sightedness. You'll see it. Trust me, Mike.
But if I could interject just a second, there's probably some reason, they just don't. Sometimes, that something may have happened that they needed that person or that rank, that his background. Not protecting the Air Force, but sometimes they just don't. People don't just turn a switch at AFPC because they can. Sometimes there are reasons, right? But I think they need to know what the reasons are. I think that master sergeant should have been told, this is why we're doing it. We had no other choice, right?
Yeah, I mean, it would be different if he knew they tried every other option,
right?
And here's why it's you. He might that person would not feel as like salty about it if they knew all the background.
If they knew the whole background, that's right. That's right.
No, I agree with that, Buck. That's sage wisdom. All right, so I got one last question for each of you, and then we're done. You guys crushed it. You guys had amazing stories. I love y'all. So Buck, I'm gonna hit you with one. These are the last 2 questions. So Buck, yours is, what type of legacy do you hope you and General Goldfein leave behind?
I think that I'm going to use a term that General Goldfein used. Every challenge has an opportunity, right? And
That's a quote on my Facebook page.
I'm going to steal that from him. Every challenge has an opportunity. And, you know, I look at it that I've had a challenge in every job that I've had. And I've had an opportunity to accomplish that challenge, that incident, that situation, whatever. And I can even tell you today that JD, just Dave, he doesn't, I can't call him chief and he doesn't want to call him general. I don't call him Dave to his face. I call him sir, but you know, it's that challenge in the civilian community now, in the public sector, as we call it. There's always an opportunity for that challenge. And, you know, I did 40 years of federal service, right? 20 years active duty, 20 years civil service. And now I'm thrown into this public sector. And, you know, it's not the same. It's not the same as how the government is run, right? So here I am, an old dog trying to learn new tricks. And again, it goes back to that challenge. I have a new opportunity. So, and I don't have anybody else to thank for this next chapter in my life, but Dave Goldfein. Yeah.
I'm excited to see, like, you know, what else y'all got in store for us.
Well, we, you know, it's just been announced that he's, you know, we're doing some stuff with the Google, and, you know, he's got some stuff with Blackstone, and, you know, there's other items in his portfolio. So he's staying busy, I'll put it that way. And also still trying to be a husband, a dad, and a grandpa. So
wow. That guy just, it's like there's 3 of them out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, Mike, last question. I don't even know why I wrote this. I guess because my podcast is called HeroFront, bringing your inner hero to the front of your life. So, Mike, last question. What does being a hero mean to you?
So I will bring it back to, so we have these robot dogs at Tyndall.
You have those?
We do have little, basically normal sized dogs that are just robots.
Can I come out there and hang out with them?
Come on, they're in.
All right.
I get to work with them all the time. But we do a lot of civilian activities. So we'll take them to schools and we'll show them off, and then you'll have all these kids that just get inspired and want to see them run. They're asked 100 questions. They just, it's amazing seeing them so interested in the dogs, but then that makes them interested in the Air Force. So it's like the big picture of, hey, I remember when I was a kid being able to see this young person operating this robot, and then thinking about that, and then one day that could be their hero. You know what I mean? Like, it's just different.
Yeah. No, those visual, you know, experiences we have are very powerful. And I feel like when you're on the other side of the coin, you know, it brings you back to it. So, you know, I'm sure you saw all sorts of cool stuff as a kid, you know, with your dad having the job that he had. And then now you're on the other side of the coin, and, you know, you're seeing people come after you, and, you know, you remember how that felt, you know, and how special those moments were. And so you're basically taking pride in yourself and giving that back to other people.
Seeing their faces light up, just seeing something they've never seen before, or asking questions, is just, that makes it for me.
Absolutely. Mike, I have a recommendation for you.
Yes, sir.
I think when you get back from your deployment, if it's at all remotely possible, I think you'd make a hell of an honor guardsman. And I think you should go to, say, tell your shirt the next time they need a base honor guardsman, like, please put my name in the hat. I want that experience, because I think you would be great at it. And I also think you would learn a lot from it. I feel like you're the type of person that would be open to learning from that experience.
Thank you.
Yeah. He's a great listener. Great listener.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And hey, so Buck, I just want to end with just telling you and Mike, thank you guys so much for not only for coming on yourselves, but you remember how we met? I must have looked like a lunatic.
No, not at all. Not at all.
So that was a really cool, experience for me, because it was the first time I got to podcast basically for the Air Force, right? Like my trip was funded and I had complete freedom to interview, whoever wanted to sit down with me. And a lot of people said it was the best part of their whole trip. Like they absolutely loved it. And I have content to this day from that 5 days because of just how many people I was able to talk to. General Goldfein's different, right? He's in another galaxy, right? The only way I knew he could ever come on is if I met him personally and pitched it to him in 10 seconds or less. And that's exactly what I did. But it never would have worked if it wasn't for you, Buck. Taking time to get to know, what I'm all about, what I was trying to do, and then having the faith in me to set that up. So that conversation was amazing. It's the second most downloaded one I've ever had. And so many people have reached out to me and said that they loved that episode, that they loved, the vulnerability, the transparency, and what he had to say about the enlisted force. I had tons of feedback from people that just absolutely loved that episode. So you have to tell them that, people loved that episode and listened to it over and over again because they enjoyed it so much. And so, Buck, I just want to tell you thanks for making that possible, because that's something impossible in my mind that you helped make possible.
No, too easy. Too easy. You did a great job in the 10 seconds. I'll put it that way.
I was in a great mood. I was in the zone that night. All right. So, Buck, final thoughts. Anything you want to share as we wrap this up?
All I can say to the airmen that listen to you, that listen to this podcast, and I know the people that you have on here are real airmen, are true heroes in other people's eyes, right? And I just appreciate your service, but I appreciate what you're doing for our airmen. It gives them another outlet. It gives them, it's not always that they want to listen to an old retired master sergeant, or a young senior airman, right? But it's always neat that that you care, right? And that you take time out of your Friday night at 7:30 at night, to chat with us, to put this on the podcast for anybody to listen to. And, whether it's something I said or Mike said, or you said, that may brighten their day, that they may go, hey man, that was me, or that was pretty cool, or whatever. But I appreciate, once an airman, always an airman. I appreciate you taking care of our airmen.
Yes, sir. I really appreciate those kind words, really.
Yep.
And the beauty of podcasting, and that we've opened that door and it's been so well received, is that, if you had let's just say a command chief or someone with a lot of, folks underneath them, that episode could introduce all of them to their views, philosophies, and their life story, and a conversation you normally would never have heard about your leader.
Right.
And so the how I've seen it bring people together and build trust has been, significant. And so, Buck, you've been a part of that journey too. So, with coming on yourself and helping me with JD. And so I wanted to thank you, for everything you've done, for having such a kick-ass son, Mike.
Yeah.
And just the countless years of being the backbone for so many generals who needed your help.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And, I'm publicly thanking my son for his service. Yeah. Proud of him.
Definitely. All right, Big Mike, final thoughts.
Just thank you for having us. Thank you for inspiring so many people. I know people for sure will listen to these podcasts and get inspired to do better or do more and try and excel in their careers just to be able to impress and promote and yeah.
And be happy and live a purposeful life.
Yes, sir.
Mike, that's the advice I'm going to give you. I didn't realize how much I valued purpose. This is my final thought. I'll just throw it in. My final thought, purpose is so important. It's why you joined, right?
Yes,
Otherwise
sir.
you wouldn't have, but you felt this purpose and you wanted something greater than yourself. And I've seen a lot of people lose sight of that, right? And once that happens, you know, that's kind of when we start getting depressed or drinking too much, etc., is when you lose sight of that purpose and you lose faith in yourself. So Mike, never underestimate the value of purpose. And if you start to lose it, go out and find it. It's there. Sometimes you just need to go, you know, searching for it.
That's awesome. That is awesome, Josh.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you learned something. But this was the hero's journey of Buck and Mike Holloway, and we're out.